brought to you by Lockjaw Global School of Business Consulting. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm one of your hosts today, Nirmala Maharaj, Director, International Affairs, alongside with Sasha Dore, Director, Organization Development and Assessment Center. Welcome to everyone joining us today from across the region, and allow me to say a special welcome to those from the USA, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Kitts, Guyana, St. Lucia, and warm Trinidad and Tobago. Lockjaw GSB Consulting offers a range of organization development consulting services. Please contact us to find out more about our schedule and a free consulting session with our experts. We continue to offer our academic and executive education programs and consulting services across the region at this time. While our school's physical location in Trinidad and Tobago remains closed at this time, we are open for business. So give us a call, send us an email, let's set up a meeting. As we customarily do in our webinar proceedings, allow me to share with you our etiquette. And to ensure that everyone has an enjoyable experience during the webinar, we invite you to keep your mic mute, and certainly for the Q&A to utilize the chat box. Today's webinar is going to be a bit different from previous sessions. It's going to be a conversational in nature, and during the entire proceedings, we invite you to share your questions, your comments, your perspectives in the chat box. Now, the outbreak of COVID-19 is continuing to cause lots of disruptions for our business and fundamentally changing the way we're doing things business right now, and certainly how we will be doing our business in the future. And it can be overwhelming for us as business leaders to keep up with the new laws, regulations, and rules, let alone to work out what's our new game plan for our business. And we see this in three phases to allow resilience for business owners. And these phases are: one, to respond, dealing with the present situation we're in; to recover, secondly, to recover, learning and emerging stronger; and thirdly, to thrive, preparing for success in the new normal. No doubt, business leaders, we are certainly spending a lot of time, and we have been spending a lot of time in the past months in the response mode. Now that the economy is reopening, it's time for us to turn our attention towards recovery, and to ensure that our business is ready to thrive. Every decision made now could impact our business's ability to thrive in the future. In this webinar, we will be speaking with Mr. Gregory Hill, Managing Director of Answer Merchant Trinidad and Tobago and Chairman of Consolidated Finance Limited, Barbados. Gregory also holds other key leadership positions, among them Director, Trinidad and Tobago Insurance Limited, Vice President, AmCham TT, Chairman of the Arthur Lockjaw GSB Alumni Board, and past President Security Dealers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And apart from his MBA, he is a fellow of ACCA and a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago. Gregory, welcome. Good day.
Thank you very much, Nirmala, Sasha. Always a pleasure to participate with Lockjaw Business School on webinars, and also to have the opportunity to engage with the student population, the alumni, and the business community. So a special good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Gregory. Gregory, let's get right into it. Now, in chatting with you in preparation for this webinar, we both recognize that this is not a typical recovery. COVID-19 is unlikely to end suddenly, given the evolving nature of the virus and the uncertain prospects and timing of a vaccine. But businesses must plan in this scenario for multiple scenarios and time horizons in order to recover and certainly to thrive. And it's perhaps planning for multiple waves in this uncertain future. Gregory, tell me, what's the scenario? Let's be brutal about the scenario that we're in. What should a leader's game plan be right now? What should we be thinking about as we re-enter business operations? Should we be looking at the pre-COVID standards, or what should be in place at this time? Our scenario game.
Okay, thank you very much, Kamala. And you know, it's important to have this conversation. Every business in Trinidad and Tobago, the region, and the wider world should be having this conversation right now in the boardroom, on the floor, the shop floor, the factory floor. But the first place to start is to assess where are we today? What has changed? So the first and most critical thing is to understand exactly what has changed in your business at this particular point in time and the impact of COVID on your business. So that's the first thing. You need to get a snapshot of where you are before you can think about moving forward. So, you know, what's your competitive positioning today? Has this changed with the onset of COVID, right? What are your customers' preferences? Competitors, business environment? What has changed? You know, the strategies that you used to gain market share and to win in the market, are those strategies still relevant? What has changed? You know, how has COVID impacted your business? And has it created new competitive advantages? Has it created threats? You know, looking at your internal business now, what in terms of your business processes have changed with COVID, with developments globally, your existing business model, the way you communicate, your channels, your workers, what is your critical staffing requirement to meet this new environment? You know, so these are some of the questions that leaders need to be asking right now, doing the analysis to understand exactly where we are now, what has changed with COVID, what does our environment look like, what does our own business look like, and really the process involves you know, stages of assessing the business's continuity, its resilience, and then coming up with a strategic game plan on how to execute and go forward. But to come back to your question, where are we now? Well, you know, global GDP is expected to contract. $138 trillion is what the world GDP is looking like, and that's down from 142 last year. So we're expecting at least a 3% reduction according to the IMF year over year. And I mean, 3% is significant. And in advanced economies, as much as 6% reduction is expected. And this is going to trickle down in terms of not only the global macroeconomic environment, but it's also going to impact our region as well as Trinidad and Tobago. So every leader should be assessing not only the business environment locally, regionally, but internationally, and then use that as a basis for determining the strategy to go forward. The IMF expects that Trinidad and Tobago, well, actually expects the Caribbean region growth rate to drop to negative 2.8%. Trinidad is expected by the IMF to contract by 4.5%. And of course, the government is putting in place as much measures as it can to dampen that drawdown and looking towards the private sector to stimulate economic activity. But if we look at the direct impact that we're seeing already in the region, most of the Caribbean region is dependent on tourism. You have Barbados, 41% of GDP comes from tourism, Jamaica 33%, Trinidad and Tobago is a lot smaller at 7.8%. But when you look at those economies and the exposure of their GDP to tourism, with the global GDP contraction, with restrictions on travel, with airlines going under, this is going to have a material impact on the GDP of these countries. And naturally, the manufacturers in Trinidad and Tobago that export to the region are going to find that the excess cash flow that the region has to purchase all goods and services will be challenged. Likewise, the energy sector is dependent on global economic activity, from the expansion of agriculture to expansion of business, oil and gas, as well as other commodities like fertilizers and the downstream products of natural gas that are combined with other products to be sold internationally. With global GDP growth expected to contract, this is going to have an impact on the markets that we serve. So both from a regional context and an international context, the effect of COVID and the effect of the decline in global GDP is going to find its ways onto our doorstep. And this is the type of analysis and type of conversation each board should be having right now.
Thanks, Gregory. And you're making a very important point for business leaders if they have not been looking at it right now to critically assess the macro environment and understanding what are the implications in terms of the GDP growth regionally, globally, and how's that going to impact on their business operations, and then take their deep dive into the scenario planning of their operations, how it's affecting not just their customers, but as well their competitors. Look at the supply chain, a very critical deep dive in terms of the scenario planning thing, area. But Gregory, you mentioned in that scenario planning, the area of risk and liquidity. And this brings me to a very important question in terms of looking at and orchestrating this new strategic game plan. As a leader, you're a leader of a financial institution interacting daily with customers. How important is this for businesses to understand their cash flow as part of this new strategic game plan?
Well, you know, the saying goes, cash is king. And in a economic crisis, it's the companies that have the cash and liquidity resilience are the ones that are going to withstand the storm, the ones that are going to take advantage of opportunities. So ensuring that your business can access liquidity is very important. So any leader should consider, what are my lines of credit? How much more can I get? What does my operating cash flow look like in the next 3 to 6 months? Do I have expenditure that is variable, that is fixed? What cost can I lay off at this point in time? What can I move to a variable cost? Can I negotiate better terms and conditions with my suppliers at this point in time? My fixed cost, my rent, for instance, can I renegotiate my rent? You know, so what are the levers that as a businessman I can use to generate additional cash flow? So cash is king. And from a capital markets perspective, an international market, the financial crisis of 2008 saw the global markets becoming quite illiquid. So companies prefer to hold on to cash. Banks and hedge funds were not extending funding and doing transactions. And that caused a really crippling effect on the global economy. In this particular scenario, there is a lot more liquidity than what occurred in 2008. Both in the United States and Europe, most of the governments have gone to their respective parliaments and senates to get permission to raise funding, inject liquidity into the system. Across the world, in Trinidad and Tobago, the same thing is taking place as countries provide liquidity to make sure that businesses can operate. And we saw the Fed stepping into the market, buying up a significant amount of treasury paper as well as investment grade bonds. And that liquidity coming to the market has provided some resilience. But when you look at it at a micro level, coming back to the business, leaders can't execute on their strategy effectively enough if they're not sufficiently liquid. So having cash, monitoring your cash flow, finding ways to increase your cash flow, you know, leaning on your payables, collecting your receivables, all of these strategies are critical at this point in time. And so cash flow is king. Coming back to that old adage that managing your cash allows you to be resilient. And I could pivot a little bit into part of the analysis. Now, we spoke about looking at the global market, the regional market, looking at your own business markets, looking inward at your business. And of course, cash flow is part of that. But a large part of this exercise in business continuity also involves looking at your resilience of your business and then looking at your strategic game plan. So going from your assessment of the environment to your own assessment of your business to the opportunities that exist going forward. Now, when we talk about business continuity, that phrase means a lot to different businesses. BCP, business continuity planning, is a critical part of modern business. Companies that did not have a BCP would have found themselves in dire straits during COVID. And this is not a Trinidad and Tobago conversation. This is a regional and an international conversation. How resilient was your business to natural disasters, a business crisis? Pandemics were never on the cards of many businesses. Planning for an interruption in your supply chain or your customer sales channels by a pandemic is not something that features in a monthly boardroom. So ensuring that businesses have a robust business continuity plan is absolutely critical. And I think going forward, the world is going to look at BCP from a different perspective. It's going to become an integral part of leadership, the leadership conversation. The infrastructure to enable business continuity is now going to feature higher on the agenda in boardrooms. HSE is going to be absolutely critical. Having IT and data backup. I mean, having your systems on the cloud, having backup disaster recovery sites that are located in safe locations, having a backup power supply, by having generators, locating your critical operating procedures and processes offsite in jurisdictions where power generation is much more reliable, having the right amount of resources, having resources that are variable, that you can reduce the headcount when revenue is down, or expand it if there's an opportunity, having your supply chain assessed to see exactly where my critical supplies are coming from. Based on the distance, there's more risk factors to getting it here. Should I find closer suppliers? Should I have more than one supplier? Should I stockpile some of my raw materials closer to home? Should I revisit my efficient order quantity to make sure that I'm adjusting my business accordingly? So those are very important parts of business continuity, but it's not to look at it in a vacuum. I mean, you're looking at the resilience in your business. So part of the BCP requires an analysis of the resilience of all of your pillars that you use to run your business. So if you are dealing with B2B or B2C, you need to look at your business model for each one and determine the level of BCP and resilience required in each of these. And then from that, you certainly will be able to look at vertical and horizontal integration, finding ways to partner with suppliers, finding a way to partner with some of your distributors, some of the retail outlets that you work with, and coming up with sort of bundle solutions to deal with providing a level of resilience during this point in time, because it's a very important part of being prepared.
Okay. Gregory, and you've brought in a very important point in the conversation and crafting this new strategic game plan. It's not just the understanding of the macro environment and your micro environment. It's beyond understanding the cash flow and the financial implications to the business continuity planning as well that goes in this new game plan. Gregory, I'm thinking about the area of workforce. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected capacity, the area of capability and affordability of the workforce? And in this new game plan, how is that going to look like or play out for us as business leaders as we plan to re-enter into the economy?
Human resource management is now more important than it has ever been before. Making sure that your employees are safe at this point in time. So HR and HSE are working hand in hand to ensure that all employees are safe, You have sanitization, you have screening, social distancing, checking temperature, sneeze guards, masks, a full range of, of process and procedures to safeguard your employees. Because at the end of the day, your employees are one of the most valuable assets that any company has. And protecting that asset is critical. So human resource management has jumped to the front, tied with HSE to make sure your human resources are first of all, very safe. Now, due to COVID, obviously, there would have been significant restrictions on the volume of workers, managers, supervisors, and leaders that could be in the office at any one point in time. Some businesses were not allowed to operate as an essential service locally, regionally, and internationally. And some cities around the world did close the number of companies that were allowed to be open. And so businesses were forced to rethink the way that they engage with their customers and the way that they operate and produce. And that would have caused a radical change in how their human resources delivered. And actually, one of the most radical changes due to COVID is the way that employees and employers engage. And employees engage with customers and suppliers. So the entire relationship between your human resources and all of the stakeholders has radically changed due to COVID. I think most companies are dealing right now with the difference between working from home, working from the office, and managing the level of productivity for those that are in the office and those that are at home. Now, for many companies, and especially the more traditional companies, where you would sign a register and come to the office, and you have this level of visual verification that you're in the office. A lot of their controls and environment that they created would have been built on swipe cards, check-in man hours. Now, a lot of that has changed, and during COVID, companies had to pivot the way that staff engaged with the rest of the workforce and the company and customers, and do that from home. So measuring employee productivity as well as the economic output from them has been a major challenge for many companies. And the results have been mixed. Some companies have found that employees are more engaged online and at home. They're more relaxed, and therefore they're more creative, producing greater content, greater ideas in fields that require that sort of creativity. In other areas where production is much more volume driven, they found that employees are working longer hours. They're more focused because they don't have the level of distractions in the office and are getting higher output. And then of course there are the examples where naturally you'd find the outliers, where some employees would have taken advantage of the opportunity to be off the radar, so to speak, and take advantage of that. So the challenge really is for supervisors, managers, and companies to find a way to engage with the employees, keep them safe, keep them productive, monitor and get the best out of them while keeping them, fully engaged. So that's the first level of activity that's taking place that has radically changed. The second one, based on the snapshot that I just gave surrounding the outlook for global GDP, the contraction, the regional economic scenario, and the potential impact on Trinidad, but also in the region, companies should now be looking at, do I have the right amount of staff? Am I overstaffed? Has COVID and the change in the way that the markets in which I serve now perform, do I need more staff? Do I have the right staff? Do I have the right talent that I need to take the business forward in this new environment? So these are the kind of conversations that HR directors, managers, and CEOs are having with their teams now, to make sure that they have the right type of talent to deliver on the new phase of business post-COVID.
So Thank you so much. And for our participants who are joining us, we are in conversation with Mr. Gregory Hill, Managing Director, Answer Merchant Bank, Trinidad and Tobago, and as well Chairman of Consolidated Finance Limited. Gregory, you've touched on some very important points in this new strategic game plan. And there are some questions that are posted in our chat box, and I want to invite Sasha to field some further questions to you based on our participants. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So Gregory, we're gonna have to jump back a little bit onto the macro perspectives that you've been sharing. We've been getting some questions on, based on the data that you've presented, you've been looking at the trends globally. What would be, in your opinion, some of the specific sectors that we as a nation should focus on post the COVID environment? And on the flip side of that, where do you see the contractions happening in terms of sectors, in your opinion, based on the data that you've been mining so far? And then we have a specific question on the insurance industry that I'll pose to you after.
Yeah. So I think the impact of COVID on every business has been different. And naturally, there are certain sectors that are going to feel the brunt of the contraction a lot faster than others. So obviously in the tourism and leisure and luxury area of the market segment, the natural inclination of human beings when faced with a threat, and this is a financial threat, would be to cut back on the excesses. So naturally you would find sectors that are exposed to those sort of changing tastes to be affected. Looking at Royal Caribbean, the performance on the international market, cruise liners have been adversely affected and associated with significant amount of risks associated with COVID. And the performance of those companies have been affected. Hotel chains have also been affected. And companies in generally in the tourism sector are facing the brunt of it, as well as the luxury sector. When you look at a customer's mindset at this critical time, uncertain future, the impact of COVID, will there be a second wave? How long is this going to last? How deep is it going to be? Will I consider the purchase of that brand new item? I was thinking about a brand new house, a brand new car, a luxury item. So, customers are going to delay purchases for significant investments until the outlook is clearer. So it's a bit opaque. So that not only translates to a reduction in a particular sector globally, but also locally as well. So we're going to see a similar sort of behavior. But on the flip side, we've seen increased activity in the food business. Globally, a lot of focus on agriculture, fertilizer, food security has become an important conversation by countries. And the companies that are operating in those sectors have seen greater interest. And that's on the primary production side, but also on the manufacturing side, as well as the retail and distribution. Groceries and distribution companies have done very well during COVID because people have been focused on sustainability of life, and food is a critical part of that. And we've seen some increased activity in that regard. We've also seen new industries being created where the home delivery service by restaurants globally. Now, this is the norm in the developed markets where a lot of the population, especially the middle income population, in the metropolitan cities would focus on delivery service, door-to-door type of food arrangements with all the top food supply companies like Seamless and I don't remember the other name offhand, but a lot of Grubhub was the name I was getting at. A lot of these companies have done really well, and I've seen a lot of M&A activity both in Europe and in the US, where companies are expanding rapidly in that area, where customers want food to be delivered to their home in a safe way. We've also seen some of these supermarkets focus on doing B2C delivery, whereby by delivering directly to the consumer in a way that is safe. We've been seeing a push in that trend. We've also been seeing a lot of activity, obviously, in pharmaceuticals. The race for a vaccine is taking place globally. And of course, those companies that are conducting that research, their share prices have done really well. And we expect that pharmaceutical, cold, symptom, anything, ventilator manufacturing, all of those things associated with pharmaceuticals have been doing very, very well as well. So, I expect to see more focus on sectors that are closer to the core of human survival, to be the sectors that will do very well, and the ones that are more on the periphery to be able to encounter some additional challenges.
Okay, great, thanks. And I mean, this morning we would have seen, or yesterday, comments coming out of the central bank talking about household debts expected to increase. So what is your take on that? As you were speaking about it, I thought it would be interesting to get your perspective on that. We are being very cautious about what we spend on, and perhaps those capital investments we are definitely going to delay. We are definitely seeing that maybe it's a wait and see approach still, even though the economy has pretty much opened up. The debt, would you say when we talk about the debt of households?
Well, this is a very difficult conversation, and it's also a sad one, because given the uneven distribution of wealth in Trinidad, in the region, globally, people are going to feel the impact of COVID-19 in different ways. There are many people that rely on the service industry for their income. They rely on tips. They rely on entertainment. They rely on transportation. If they're taxi drivers, waitresses, they work in different types of companies on the factory floor that would have been closed. A lot of people, part of their income is augmented by other services that they do and provide. And with that reduction in extra cash flow, but also basic earnings for people who were on contract, temporary workers that were downsized, it's a sad situation for many, and there are many that are suffering. So let me just say that, and this is when families step up to provide support to each other. And that's an important role of the family right now, to provide that enabling support during this difficult financial time. But likewise, the financial institutions have been exposed to an increase in delinquency, because customers obviously have lower cash flow and they have to focus on feeding their families. And thankfully, the international as well as the local regulators have afforded the banks the opportunity to provide additional space for customers to meet their obligations. And this is an industry-wide comment. A lot of the banks have been able to offer deferred loan payments to give customers that extra cash flow so that they could feed their families. We should give credit to the central bank for reacting very quickly to the pandemic and affording the banks the bandwidth to be able to help their good customers get a little bit more time. So yes, there will be an increase in the risk. I also expect the financials of banks and insurance companies to come under pressure because of the delinquency. And of course, the accounting rules dictate you value your assets, which are loans, for instance, and investments, based on the changing economic environment, as well as the performance and the probability of default. And it's going to impact the financial performance, not only in Trinidad, but regionally and internationally. And we've been seeing the results of some institutions being published showing these effects already.
Definitely. So keeping with the financial and insurance sector, there's a question, based on your snapshot of where we are, do you think this contraction may have a positive effect on insurance companies, as most expect, or given that the world is being affected instead of a region, do you expect that insurance services may be negatively affected?
Well, So let me just say, an insurance is a hedge against negative risk. Okay, the impact of COVID was a negative event globally, and therefore insurance companies on the macro level will get more attention as companies try to hedge against that risk impacting them as significantly as it did before. So at a macro level, insurance companies will probably benefit. I draw reference to a transaction I did many years ago for the Princess Juliana Airport. I did a complete financing of a new airport terminal. And one of the things I insisted from a financing standpoint was to include hurricane business interruption insurance. So in the event of a disaster, there would be cash flow and a payout from the insurance company to meet the shortfall in revenue during the period of recovery from the hurricane. So those types of insurance instruments where companies now look at their risk assessment, see the impact on their supply chain, see the risk to employees, premises, their IT systems, and use insurance as a tool to hedge those areas of weakness. I think that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity for the insurance companies. I do see that surplus cash flow being directed to life insurance, where people examine their health, examine the risks to their family as the sole breadwinner, what would happen in the event of a disaster. And a disaster, yes, a pandemic is one, hurricanes, earthquakes, we have flooding, not just Trinidad, I'm talking globally. And therefore, I'm sure the head of the household across the board will be looking at the resilience of the family. And so life insurance should feature a little bit more. But I also do expect that in the priority of needs, some companies may want to manage that risk using their cash flow and maybe looking at their expenditure and maybe trying to negotiate better terms, as the case may be, for wider risks in exchange for the premiums. So I do expect some activity in the insurance sector. Okay,
great. So you're saying that pandemic would be considered a disaster, and perhaps in the fine print, some of the negative or the fallouts of this COVID situation would perhaps be covered by our insurance.
But I don't want to speak on behalf of
I'm just trying to figure out where the pandemic fall in our coverage, and does it have scope in our fine print under what constitutes disaster, if it's covered in there? That's just by the way.
Well, that's a good observation, and I'm sure the Insurance Association of Trinidad, but globally, they're looking at their coverage, what they can cover. They're having conversation with their reinsurers to assess and price that risk. And obviously, a hedge usually costs something, so it's to quantify the probability of it, the price it accordingly, reinsure it, and then see if it's affordable to the consumer. So that risk analysis and costing is, I'm sure, is being tabled now by the insurance experts.
Great. So Nimal, I'm gonna pass back to you.
Sure, Sasha, and continuing the conversation on the new strategic game plan and very important questions posed by our participants here. Gregory, things have changed. It's a new normal. We certainly don't expect it to go back to pre-COVID days. Tell me, from your opinion as a business leader, and we're going to go on the soft skill side for a business leader.
Okay.
How important should be, or what changes should we be adopting in our communication practices? And I'm looking at the area of our verbal, non-verbal communication and the whole area of continuing to maintain trust and accountability.
The relationship between employer and employee is a very sensitive one. Trust is at the backbone of that. There's the employee-employer psychological contract, which is a time-honored relationship that has existed, more so from the perspective of ensuring the safety of your staff, ensuring that that you look out for the interests of your staff, being more present in the moment, in the situation, facing your staff. I think leaders have to spend more time walking the floor and engaging with their staff, understanding the issues, understanding how they're feeling, the risks. Not everyone deals with a change in environment the same way. Not everyone views a risk the same way, and people are going to react differently. And as a business leader, your staff will be looking to you for direction. And they'll be looking to see how you handle this new environment. So leaders need to be very focused on the imprint of their own behavior on to the organization and how they interact with the staff. So building that trust in relationship that the employee expects of the employer is going to be something that is not only beautiful but also something to be protected and developed.
And we're looking at the workplace changes. What has changed in your workplace? Tell us if you can give us the Answer Merchant Bank experience, and just to say how you have, as a case study, a little insight on the case study, so that we can look at it from one organization perspective and what has been some of the best practices in terms of that change coming about.
COVID brought with it significant uncertainty for many. The ability to react to the changing circumstance was one of the things that allowed our business to continue in a very reliable, if not efficient and improved way. We did have business continuity planning in place, so we pulled on that very quickly. We also took strategic decisions some time ago to lower the level of risk in our operation, and that worked to our favor. We moved our entire banking platform into the cloud a year ago. So naturally with COVID, we were able to leverage on that decision and ensure that within short order, we could move our organization online so that staff could work from home. And that radical change in the way we operated, we did not leave anyone behind. We assessed the higher risk staff first, make sure that they were safe at home. And we put measures in place for those that were more resilient to be able to work in the office and to manage the numbers and exposure. We did move close to 75% of our staff to work from home, digitally, online. And so most of our customer engagement took place digitally. We implemented use of WhatsApp, video, Microsoft Teams, Skype, all the technology, communication technology that was available to ensure that we were engaging with our customers, who were obviously very concerned at this point in time as well, but also our staff. And we were able to give them the tools to be able to do that. And the agility of our business to do that was based on strategies that we executed to minimize risk before. And so I have to say that we did manage it quite well. I think that as an industry, customers were expecting to be provided with a safer environment across the board, social distancing, having the spots lined out for customers to stand apart from each other, having the sneeze guards, having all of the equipment in place, and temperature guns. I think across the industry, customers may have been expecting that to happen much faster for everyone. Some were more prepared than others, and I guess customers will reward over time those institutions that were better prepared to protect them and the staff.
So we are in conversation with Mr. Gregory Hill, Managing Director, Answer Merchant Bank, Trinidad and Tobago, and Chairman of Consolidated Finance Limited, Barbados. Gregory, as we wrap up today's webinar and very important points you've raised for business leaders as we re-enter into the business operations into the new economy, certainly you're signaling to us that it's not business as usual, and certainly we should not be, or if we were looking at our old strategic plan or this plan that existed in the pre-COVID days and just brushing it off and saying, yes, maybe I'm just going to institute the physical distancing, the social distancing practices, the other requirements related to the health guidelines, we're on the wrong path. We need to delve deeper into looking at deeper analysis on the macro environment, on different areas of our business operations beyond the cash flow area there, the business continuity area there, the HR area beyond the workplace and workspace, and as well as our own practices as business leaders in our communication areas. Lots of points you've raised here. Tell me, as we conclude, what are your concluding statements for our business leaders on developing their new game plan?
First of all, I'm always delighted to participate in anything to do with Arthur Lockjack School of Business. Being a graduate of the school, being the chairman of the Alumni Association, and a special good afternoon to my co-directors on the alumni board. I'm always going to encourage the public to engage with the school for training and exposure to new strategies. And of course, webinars like this, it's a great opportunity to learn new skills, to pick up clues and points on latest trends in terms of business and leadership issues. So this is let me just say that this was a great opportunity for me to participate, and I hope it was meaningful. And my closing comments would be to provide the listening audience with a little bit of what I tend to call an A-SWOT. Most business leaders are accustomed to the typical SWOT analysis in their business, but COVID has taught us that we need to be more present in our business, but we also need to add an A to the SWOT. So A-SWOT for me means adding A to the existing strategic game plan. So A would encompass agility, being able to move much faster as an executive, speed of decision making, speed of getting information, responding to the environment and what is taking place. Without that agility, leaders and businesses would have suffered quite a bit during COVID, and going forward, as the markets change and modify, leaders need to be very agile. The other A in a SWOT would be alpha. Alpha is a way of finding the opportunity in your day-to-day processes to save on costs, but also to bootstrap other activities to generate increased income and revenue and cash flow. So finding the alpha in everything that you do is going to be very important, going to be a very important part of the future. Adaptability is the third A, which is the ability to change the way that you're doing business, to be able to pivot to satisfy the needs of your suppliers, with your customers and your employees. And as your industry and market changes, you're going to need to apply the A, the agility, the alpha, and the adaptability to the existing SWOT, to see where you can pivot your business to benefit at this difficult time. So the comments I made earlier about retail companies now doing backward integration, where you have supermarkets and also delivering now home delivery. You have restaurants doing a lot more home delivery. So you have a lot of changes taking place in the market. So leaders should be looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats, and applying the principles of agility, alpha, adaptability to see where they can stress test, bootstrap, streamline, find additive income in this new environment, because post-COVID, the world is not going to be the same way. People are not going to think the same way. Markets are not going to operate the same way. And it's up to the leaders to be able to provide that alpha, provide that A to the SWOT in going forward.
Very good. And so to Gregory, we want to say thank you to you for being with us today, to being our presenter today.
Namala, before you go, we just have one more question to pick up Gregory on.
I thought I was getting away.
No, we want to know, you know, how that crystal ball that you have. We have some of our attendees asking, well, what is your forecast for the economic outlook of Trinidad and Tobago? So if you can, you know, look into that crystal ball and tell us the forecast, we'd appreciate that. What can we expect in the medium term for Trinidad and Tobago when we look at the economy?
Well, I think God is a Trini is not the best phrase to use today. I think the listening audience would really want to get a little bit more depth to that response. The fact is that the global economic environment is going to reflect a reduction in real GDP. And Trinidad and Tobago, it's forecasted by the IMF to drop by 4.5%. Yep. So that is that based on the data, this is what the data is saying. Okay, and naturally we are facing some structural issues in our energy sector, making sure that our natural gas remains relevant in the global market space is the #1 conversation really taking place at the highest level and is getting the attention. I know that there are steering committees set up to deal with this, and that is going to have a big impact on our overall GDP, making sure that our downstream industries stay active, stay relevant, people are employed, but also the deployment of resources from the state to help stimulate construction activity. That's another area that's going to drive some economic activity, and obviously all of the service industries that support the infrastructure, support construction, support the energy sector, all of those sectors benefit from it. So the numbers tell us -4.5, but there are a lot of enabling factors that could still come to play that will be able to dampen that impact.
Thanks for that.
Sasha,
So
we're good.
Close off now because I know we're just about on time.
So on our note of thanking Gregory, thank you so much for being our presenter today on this very important topic, building your strategic game plan to win in the post-COVID-19 environment, and ideally poised at this time as businesses are re-entering into the economy. We're opening up on that phase there, and sharing with us your perspectives and leaving us with that very important A in front of the SWOT part of it there. So thank you again, Gregory. Always a pleasure having you with us.
Namala, Sasha, thank you very much to the alumni, the business community that have joined today. It's been a pleasure to participate today, and I wish you all a good afternoon.
Okay, so as we wrap up this evening, this afternoon's webinar, a reminder that we are currently open for September student applications for MBA and bachelor's program. Straight from Cape and CSEC, our students can enroll for our Bachelor International and Sustainable Business program. For graduate programs, here's the International MBA to consider, the Executive MBA to consider, as well as other specialized programs in Port and Maritime, International Trade and Logistics. You can reach out to Max McLeod, our recruitment manager. His contact details presented to you. And as well on the executive education portfolio, what's new? So in the executive education portfolio, we continue to scan the environment, bring to you innovative, relevant programs that's here for you during your upcoming months that are online, as well as you can reach us at any time. Contact open enrollment at lockjackgsp.edu.tt. And Gregory mentioned the A's in the A SWOT. Hey, as we transition into our workplaces and businesses, and we're returning to organization life in this environment here, you can reach out to us for our organization consulting services, and let's discuss further the A in the A SWOT. And finally, as we look at and we move from June into July, what's our webinar? What's going to take the shape? What's going to be the theme? And we're going to be talking about leadership, and which is going to be delivered and under the auspices of Dr. Kamala Mangal, Director for Accreditation and Quality, and for the Center for the Leadership Institute at Lockjack GSB. So our invitation is being posted or will be posted in the chat box and other social media platforms for you to register to join us in the July webinars. And as we wrap up this evening, I want to say thank you again to Gregory. You've touched on many areas of considerations for us as business leaders. And as well to say a special thank you to our participants joining us time and time again on the Webinar Wednesday platform. We look forward to hearing from you. So as usual, kindly complete the feedback survey, the post-webinar feedback survey. And to stay tuned with us on a few minutes on the link, we'll be posting it on the chat box, chat room for you to fill out. And of course, feel free to contact us on your consulting and training needs. Information, the contact details on the screen there. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Keep safe. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Gregory. Bye. I'm going to hang in a little bit, so because I'm actually hosting the webinar, so I'm going to stay on a few minutes. If anyone wants to have access to the links for registration for the leadership webinars, and so it's posted on the chat box. And look out for the evaluation link as well that we would send to you. It's actually under evaluation, but just feedback so that we can make sure that upcoming webinars really speak to the areas that you would like to hear about, and for us to, to bring the speakers, the relevant speakers and industry experts to you through the Webinar Wednesday sessions. So look out for that. And of course, some of you have been asking about the recording for the webinar. We are going to post it on our YouTube channel, and the link was posted, but we'd also send it to you via email as well.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Take care, Gregory. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.